So, welcome to the first episode of Subject to Finance. The idea behind Subject to Finance is to try and give real estate agents a little bit more of an understanding of what's going on in the world of finance and how that pertains to what their buyers are experiencing when getting finance to buy that next home that they're looking at. It's designed to be an interactive thing, so it'll be done on Monday mornings and it will look back at the last 7 days. But what we're hoping is that agents out there that have questions might like to make a note of those questions, put them in the comments below, send us an email, so that we can actually go back the following week and provide some sort of an idea as to what the answer to that question is. Ultimately, what we're looking for is how can we help agents to have better conversations with your clients. So whether that's buyers or vendors and setting expectations around things like valuation, or whether it's helping speed up and close that sale through being better prepared in terms of getting finance sorted in terms of your buyers and their banks. So how can you help in that process and what's your role to play? Now, your role is to sell houses. Our role is to do finance, but when we play together really nicely, things come together well and you tend to close those sales quicker. So we see some value in helping agents to sort of understand that side of the process. So first episode, my name's Andrew Chambers. I'm a co-founder of Teller. Teller's a platform that looks after home buyers in terms of getting finance through the banks sorted. We use digital means to do that, but we also have a team of advisors that sit behind it and support those people. So, what are we going to cover in these sessions? We'll cover what's going on at a macro level in terms of economy to some degree. We'll cover off a little bit of what we're seeing in terms of housing numbers, valuations, what's happened in the last week in terms of things like rates and other terms and conditions we might be seeing out of banks, and anything just generally that relates to the ability for your buyers to be able to afford and get home loans in a manner that helps you guys out. So it's Monday morning and we're looking back at what's happened in the last week. Obviously you would have heard in the news a lot about a technical recession in New Zealand. Whether you understand what that means, I think a lot of people just take it as being a negative. Things aren't so good in the economy. The media is never very good at actually explaining what these things are. So I thought I'd start off with actually talking a little bit about what is a technical recession. Well, a recession in itself is really just that for the last 2 quarters, we've seen a decline in our gross domestic product. So we've seen that number slip back as a percentage. So it's gone negative. But then what is gross domestic product? Because I think a lot of people don't really understand what that is, and it's really our productivity. So it's the worth of all of our goods and services that we produce in New Zealand. So that's tangible goods, so it's things like, our traditional things like meat and milk products, but it's also intangible goods like the services we provide, such as tourism or little things right down to a taxi ride. So it's all those things that are productive that make up our gross domestic product number, and what it's saying is that that's gone backwards for 2 quarters. So those numbers are going backwards, and the lower that number, the lower the wealth of the nation in a sense. So it's an important number. It's a measure of how big our economy is. What does it mean for the real estate industry? I think really it's a couple of things. It impacts again on valuation because it's in a depressed market. People are prepared to pay less. People are less likely to list, and so you kind of have a slight downward spiral happening in terms of those things. Whether we are at the bottom of that now because we're suddenly talking about it last week, I doubt it. I think actually that probably was something that started that was happening 6 months ago, and we're actually probably seeing green shoots coming out the other side of it now, but it takes 2 quarters to measure that and actually to be able to say that you're in a recession. So hopefully it's not going to take more than 2 quarters before we actually say we're actually out the other side of it again. So other things that we saw last week, RENZ came out with the May numbers in terms of sales in residential sales. What did we see in May? Well, we're the lowest since 2011, and again you could put a lot of a negative spin on that. Well, actually the lowest if you take out the lockdown May that we had in 2020. But on a positive note, I think in terms of where we were at on May last year, we're down something like 0.4% on what we saw in terms of home sales last May. So, you know, we're sort of roughly where we were a year ago. Another positive note is that we're up 30% in terms of May versus April. So if that's a trend, well, that's a trend that I'd like to see, and I'm sure we all would. So yeah, some negativity there, but also I think good to see that trend heading up. What else have we seen in the last week? One of the biggest changes from the banks is we're seeing the unwinding of some of the changes that were made going back a couple of years around the treatment of expenses. So we had a bit of a pendulum swings too far to one side momentum a couple of years back, where you would have heard of banks being over analytical on expenses such as gym fees and Netflix, and you know the key one that was talked about a lot was avocados on toast sort of thing. What has happened is we've seen the banks come back a little bit on that and say actually some of those things really are discretionary, and we do understand that as borrowers, if you were under pressure, you would probably quit your gym membership or cut off the Netflix or whatever it might be. So that's a really good outcome for borrowers. It gives them a little bit more room to actually be treated as in control of your finance, and understanding that you will cut these things back if you are under pressure financially to support the mortgage over anything else. So I think that's a great move from the banks. Really pleasing to see. It is worth noting though that there are some things that banks don't treat as discretionary, and I think a key one is where you do something through faith or for other reasons such as tithing into churches or supporting family members, or things that are expenses that you're unlikely to give up. You know, they're still going to take those things into consideration. So yeah, something to keep in mind. What have we seen in terms of interest rates in the last week? It's actually been a pretty slow week this week, although in the current environment, it's not a week goes by that something doesn't change. So going back a couple of weeks ago, we saw BNZ move its 1-year rate up by about 0.34%. And it's continued to do some tweaks this year, putting its 18-month rate up by 0.1%, its 3-year up by 0.3%, and its 4-year up by 0.1%. Not major stuff, tweaking around the edges. Other than that, pretty static across the banks in the last week on the interest rate front. Just as a barometer, probably in terms of the Aussie banks, ANZ and BNZ probably being the most aggressive on pricing out there at the moment, with ASB and Westpac being less likely to follow suit or to try and win over those two. So yeah, that's about it for this week, and I hope these briefs become something that interests you on a weekly basis. But as I say, I'd be really keen to get your questions so that we can answer those. And look forward to talking to you again next Monday morning. Talk to you soon. Bye.